Good afternoon or good evening. I am Steve Kaplan. I'm the Neubauer Family Professor at Chicago Booth. I'm also the Kessenich Faculty Director of the Polsky Center, and I helped start the New Venture Challenge. So welcome to everybody. It is my pleasure to be here with Mariana Castillo for a Zoom side chat celebrating the NVC at 25. And Mariana is the founder and CEO of Ben & Frank, quote, an online optical store designed to disrupt the traditional optical market in Mexico. The store offers all types of fashionable glasses, as well as a vision testing system, enabling consumers to choose and buy affordable glasses. And we're going to hear a lot more about Ben & Frank the rest of this session. So I'm really excited about this because Mariana was a student of mine, not just once, not twice, but 3 times. I think that's a record. She was in the New Venture Challenge in 2015 with a different business. She was in entrepreneurial finance in the fall of 2015 and in the New Venture Challenge with Ben & Frank in the spring of 2016. And the goal of this episode is to tell Mariana's story from the beginning of her journey to today. So, Mariana, welcome. Thanks for joining us you're in Mexico City?
I am in Mexico. Thanks for inviting me. And that's got to be some kind of record, Steve, to be 3 times in a class with you.
3 times, I think that's, there are a couple other people, but that's the max. And I think it's like 2 or 3. So it's very unusual. So let's get started. How did Ben & Frank start? Where did it come from?
So it was quite serendipitous, I'd say. I had a pair of glasses that I didn't even take to classes at Booth anymore because they looked kind of ugly. And when I realized that my prescription wasn't even accurate anymore, I said, in the US where you can buy anything online, I bet I can buy some glasses online. And so I went online, bought some glasses, had a great experience, told Benny, my husband, who was also studying with me at the time. He bought a pair of glasses, and we were super excited about the whole experience and it being about a quarter of the cost of what my previous glasses had been in Mexico. And I was just thinking, how is that possible? And so we started researching what was going on in the market in Mexico to understand if we could disrupt it or if it was a regulatory thing. And basically what we found out was that there's been innovation in basically every country in the world except Mexico for a really long time. And that if we went with a direct-to-consumer model, we could actually provide affordable, fashionable glasses to people. And we thought that made a lot of sense to at least try it.
So, and when did you come up with the idea?
So that was probably March 2015.
Okay, so it was the year before, and then you went back to Mexico that summer. Did you try to get it started, or what did you do?
Yeah, so I actually had an internship that I had agreed to with a VC fund in Mexico. And so Eduardo and Benny, who were my co-founders at the time, we launched in Mexico with an MVP sort of to get it started and to see if someone would buy what we thought made a lot of sense, but a lot of people thought it was kind of crazy to do it. And turns out we did. It took us 2 days to sell our first pair of glasses online. From a random person. Otherwise, we'd gotten some friends and family sales at the beginning. But that was basically a customer we acquired through advertising. And that's sort of when we said, well, maybe someone will buy what we have to sell.
And this was over the summer. This was the summer of 2015. Very interesting. So you got a customer and decided to keep going. What did you do? What did you do before that, or before B school? Were you always an entrepreneur, or you were a venture capitalist? What did you want to be, and how did you get from that to decide to start a company?
Yeah, so I studied economics in college, and I actually went to work for the Central Bank of Mexico for a few years. And honestly,
that's the bureaucracy, not the entrepreneurship. No.
Exactly. Entrepreneurship was not in my mind at all. Actually, quite the contrary, I would say, because I was my parents had been sort of entrepreneurs, more in lifestyle businesses, and they didn't really have a lot of success. So it had been, I'd say, fairly complicated for me when I was younger to think about entrepreneurship. And
Oh,
then working for the Central Bank of Mexico is actually, people say Booth is where the fun goes to die. I'd say it's Central Bank of Mexico is where the innovation goes to die. So I wouldn't say it was anything entrepreneurial of any sort. But when I got to Booth, things kind of changed.
and by the way, I think it's University of Chicago that said that, but it's not true any longer. We have to be clear. You had fun as an MBA, didn't you?
Definitely. I would never say that as something that is actually true.
Okay, very good, very good. I just want to make that very clear in case somebody's listening who does not go here, that it actually is quite a bit of fun for the MBA students. I think the college students too, but particularly the MBA students.
Best
Okay, so
years
you
of my
were
life.
so you did the central bank, then you came to business school, and then you sounds like you were going to be an investor, but then this came up, and you decided to give it a go.
Yeah, a lot of people go to business school already thinking what they want to do, especially because recruiting season starts like the day you get into school. But I was completely unsure of what I wanted to do, so I just wanted to explore. And then when I was good in finance, and I would wanted to maybe explore that side, private equity, venture capital. But then I realized that being on the operational side, and I think this is something I realized during my internship, where I worked with a startup here in Mexico, and I just realized that being on the operations was super exciting. You get to learn a ton more. You get to have a lot of impact. It's a lot harder in a lot of ways, I would say. And then if you really want to be a good investor, I think having some operational experience is always good. So I thought, well, why not? And then at the same time, this idea comes up and we start testing it. It's like, well, we'll see if this actually works out or not. But I want to be working at a startup, that I know for sure.
Okay, so then, so you did the summer. You preferred the trying the startup to being to doing the investing. So then, what happened? So you had your first customer, but it was like not a real thing yet. How did you get from there to kind of, I guess, the getting to the new venture challenge? So what did you do next?
So I'd say the first couple of months we were kind of understanding how we would acquire customers, and then how we could sell. We got a ton of questions around how do I get my prescription, because in Mexico people aren't used to having an optometrist or an ophthalmologist. So basically, it was very difficult to get people to have an eye exam, and we had to make sure that we could provide that for them. So the couple of months were that, and then we also had to a lot of questions around how do I try them on, and basically what we did there was provide a home try on experience, and we tested that out as well, where we would send them through FedEx, and people would try them on and send them back. And so we started figuring out all those small details of the business model that would help us. And in the end, we started growing through our digital acquisition, and we got to the NVC. We had a significant amount of traction, I would say.
So you did. So by the time, so you were doing this then in the fall while you were in school.
Yeah, it was
So how
it
did you do
was
that? Because you took my class, and I recall you actually did pretty well in my class. So how did you do that?
yeah. I think that it was difficult because we were juggling with everything at the same time, but we were excited about what we were building. There were three of us in Chicago, which is Eduardo, Benny, and myself. And then we had a fourth co founder who was in Mexico. And she had a very different skill set. She's a fashion designer. She had worked with fashion brands before. And so she really brought something different to the table. Plus, she was in Mexico, so she could actually wrap up the glasses and send them, which was a big problem for us
Hmm.
being in
Hmm.
Chicago. But when people would call the call center, it would be us. So we kind of organized our classes around that. where either Benny, Eduardo, or myself would get it on our cell phone, and then that was basically how we organized the call center for that.
I see. So it's really very much bootstrapping, huh? That was being very scrappy. So okay, so you're getting some traction, you're growing, and then you get into the New Venture Challenge. And what do you remember about the NVC?
I think the MVC was a lot of fun, a lot of work, a lot of pressure, I'd say, and a lot of help. So we got a lot of help with mentors. We got a lot of help with people that understood what we were trying to build. And it was really amazing to. A couple of years ago, I was looking at the video from our NVC finals. And when you look at the feedback that we got from the judges at the time, and it was dead on what was going to be the problem with when we started to scale. So they saw it well before we did, but definitely interesting and definitely fun and an experience that just you challenge yourself constantly because you have people that are super talented all around you trying to grow the business. Obviously, you're trying to win, and whoever says otherwise is lying. But obviously you want to win, but you also understand that the process is what makes the business. It's not necessarily winning. It's nice to have more money in your pocket at the end of the day, obviously.
Now, were the people on your team, were they people who were going to go do the business, or was it a team just people who you got to help you, or what was on? How did you build your team at the New Venture Challenge, and then was it the team you took to market?
It was a little bit of both. So Eduardo and Benny were going to work on the business. They had some debt from being sponsored by consulting firms, so it was kind of unknown at what point they would be fully on board, but it was something that was debated. And then we had a couple of people who were just helping us through the NVC and kind of get the business started, and that was a lot of fun. I think for them it was a good experience to learn, and for us it was a lot of great, smart hands to be working on the business. And then Benny, who's actually my husband, and I decided that despite actually working really well together, that it was not the best idea to have all of our eggs in the same basket, both in terms of finance and in terms of if this fails, we don't want to lose our marriage as well because we actually like each other. And so we decided that we would only be working together for a few months. And then afterwards, I would be staying in the company and he would just stay on as an advisor for a couple of things because he was actually the most techie of us and he could help out in a couple of things. But other than him having an advisor role, he would no longer be active in the day-to-day of the business. And I think that turned out to be a smart decision because we're still married and the business is still going. So
That's very good decision. Yeah, I would never do a business with my wife. That I love my wife, but that would not work for us. So very good. What now you made the finals, but you didn't win. Why did what happened there? What did the judges get right? What did they get wrong? And were you discouraged?
So I think there are a couple of things that happened. One was we came in sixth. I think we got about $15,000 in investment at the time. This was 2016, so obviously a few years ago. Because every year you get more prize money, and I'm always jealous of the teams.
I know it's terrible. You would have gotten a lot more last year and this year. So anyway, that's it's a good. It's it is what it is. Believe me, I wish we had a lot more money to put into you and Grubhub and Simple Mills. I mean, that would have been very good for us.
It would have been a smart investment, I think. But I think at the time a couple of things happened. One was some of the prize money was difficult to get it to companies that were not necessarily in the US. I think the other thing that happened was, and I probably didn't understand it at the time, was when you talk about scalable businesses, what that means in terms of financing is very difficult to understand when you're an entrepreneur building things. And what I'm going to try to clarify is we thought our company was venture backable, and I'd say it is, but it's not necessarily super venture backable, because it's going to be very difficult for us to be a billion-dollar company, which is something that obviously the judges are looking for. I know we're going to be a great large business. I just don't think it's going to be very fast for us to get to that unicorn status, which is what basically a lot of the judges are looking for. Maybe even a fail fast if you're going to fail, but just maximize the odds of really scaling to $1 billion.
Now, it did. I mean, it was the case. I remember people said, "Oh, you're Warby Parker, but why isn't Warby Parker going to do this?" And I know you had an answer, which turned out to be right. But how did you respond to that?
I think we had two answers. One is, usually American companies take a while to go to Mexico. And we had the example of Amazon, who like went to India before going to Mexico. Amazon started in Mexico like 5 years ago. So it took a really long time for them to get to Mexico. And that was like the examples we had. And then the other one is, we actually had someone that had spoken to the Warby Parker founders and asked them if international expansion was in their plans and if Mexico was in their plans. And they said, no, it's not a top 10 market. We're very focused in the US. Maybe we'll do Canada, maybe we'll do Europe, but we're not going to do Mexico. And obviously we didn't have this direct from the source, but it was something that we've heard from. And so I remember one of the judges asking us, well, why isn't Warby Parker coming? And we gave this answer. And she said, well, I'm really good friends with one of the founders, so I'm going to talk to them. And then she sent them a text message like right in the middle of the presentation. And I was like, well, I hope this is right, because otherwise we're going to be looking really ridiculous.
Oh, that's very funny. So so it's not called Warby Parker. I should have asked you this earlier. It's called Ben and Frank. That's not like a Mexican type name. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that played into the name. One was, we wanted a name that sounded international, just because since we knew we wanted to build a brand, it was something that we needed, one, to be easily shaped into other countries if we decided to go international. Two, it was something that could be easily said in Spanish. So people say Ben and Frank, and it's not. And three, we wanted something that had to do with glasses. And so Benjamin Franklin invented bifocals about 250 years ago. And we just thought, he's creative, he's a problem solver, he's intellectually curious. Why not sort of drive the business in that way, and then have an inspiration of a character that we thought was kind of cool.
Oh, that is very interesting. And do people in Mexico know that it's Benjamin Franklin, or or is that?
If you look it up, it's on our website. Everyone asks and they love the answer, which is something that's cool. But I don't think a lot of people make that relationship early on.
They don't know it. So you did the New Venture Challenge, and you made the finals. You got some money, and then did you just decide, I'm going to do it? Did you say, should I do it? How'd you make that decision?
So for me, it was the first turning point, I would say, was around February, where what we did was we did a trunk show where we took our glasses and we wanted to see what would happen to people that had not converted online. So we just kind of made an invite saying we're going to be at this trunk show. And in that month, we sold $25,000, which at the time was a lot for us. And I just kind of realized that this could pick up. I said, like, no one knows this brand, and we're already getting $25,000 of sales in 1 month. What's going to happen when people, like, a lot of people know the brand? And so that was my first point of sort of saying this could work. And then during the NVC, just like, we had good traction. We were growing. We had good net promoter scores. And I just thought if I didn't do it, I would really regret it. So I was convinced of doing it, even if we didn't win the New Venture Challenge.
Okay, so you decided to do it, and then how'd you get started back in Mexico? Did you need to raise money? What'd you do?
Yeah, so we tried to raise money. We talked to a couple of investors in the US, and I mean, this feels like tons of years ago because now I see a lot of money pouring into Mexico. So I think things would be very different if I'd started the business today, I think.
Is that right? Well, I'll ask you that later. That's interesting. So it's really changed. Interesting. So go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
No, and we talked to a few, and a lot of them were like, "Yeah, I think Mexico's a small market. We're not going to invest in a company in Mexico." And so we had a few setbacks in that in American investors. Then we went and pitched to two local funds in Mexico, and basically we had very harsh feedback, which was your cap table is kind of messed up because you have two people that are not devoted to the business full time right now, and if they don't believe in the business,
Even
then why
though
should
one was
I?
even though one was your husband, right?
Yeah, one was my husband, and the other one was Eduardo. And the thing with Eduardo was, we know he's gonna come back. It's just it has to make sense, and he has to pay back a little bit of his debt with consulting because it's a lot of money, and it doesn't make sense to raise money for him to pay back AT Kearney. That doesn't make a lot of sense. We want to build the business, and so we got that feedback, which was very harsh. And so we decided to say, well, screw it. We're going to raise from people that are telling us that they'd put money in. So we did an angel round. We did about 500K in an angel round. And what we thought was, we'll use that money, build the business, prove the traction belongs to Maria Jose and myself, who are actually running the business in the day to day. And then the cap table is not going to look as weird a year from now when we try to fundraise again. And so we actually went back to fundraise a year later with those funds. Eduardo had quit his job as a consultant and had joined the company because the company was doing great. And so basically, we managed to fundraise from the same funds that had actually told us no the first time around.
I see. So that was a year later. Now, when you were, running the business, so now what is it all on the internet? Is it in stores? What? Explain to me exactly what the business looks like, or what you did at least that first year.
So we started opening stores. At first, they were like pop up stores, they were kind of temporal. And then we actually started opening just more stores. So 2017, we've opened our first permanent store. We now have 30 stores running. We have about 120 employees, 320 employees working for
Well,
us. A lot of that is in the retail, but our website is still a huge source of traffic, and people get to know us. So about 70% of the people that buy from us are getting to know us online. And so we're very focused on an omni-channel experience where we acquire online, some convert online, some convert offline, and then that interaction is very interesting.
so that's interesting. So some people buy in person, some buy online, some buy both. How does that work? That's basically how it works.
It's how it works, and a lot of people get their try on online, and then they go to the store to get an eye exam, or they get a try on and then they want to try on more, so they end up going to the store, or they have their first purchase in the store, and then the subsequent purchases are done online.
But the key thing is they have to get the eye exam, and so eye exams you do in the store rather than people are not going to their doctors, although they can, I suppose.
Yeah, they can. It's just in Mexico, it's not that normal. So the way the industry works in Mexico is that local retailers have optometrists and they do the eye exams there. And so we had to do the same when we
I
started opening home stores, which is
Very
actually a
interesting.
really nice experience for the customer because you have like a one stop shop. And then it's very easy to be responsible. If anything is wrong with your prescription, of course we'll fix it. It doesn't matter if it was a mistake in the optometrist or whatever. It makes it very simple for the customer.
And how are you differentiated from the existing people or the legacy companies?
No, I think that the biggest thing is we've built a brand that people love, and the value proposition for that brand is great. So the experience around buying with us is fantastic. It's more fashion oriented than the traditional pharmaceutical purchase.
Hmm.
So we have a net promoter score that's over 90, and that we've kept it that way almost through our entire journey. And then it's just we're significantly cheaper than the alternatives out there. So if you want to purchase a pair of Ray-Bans, which is the comparable quality for us, you would have to pay about twice or 2.5 times what we're selling for. So it's attractive for them, and the brand is appealing. People feel proud of wearing Ben and Frank, which is always something that we worked for, and the reason why we recruited our fashion co-founder to kind of build an attractive brand and not just be a convenient cheaper product, because we really wanted it to be a superior product at a better price.
Wow. Now, was that so? Did everything go as planned? So is that what you planned from the start, or what went as planned and what didn't go as?
So building a brand was definitely planned. I don't think we could have planned the execution we've managed to do. So we've done surveys, and about 10 to 15% of the Mexican population knows us, which for a
Wow.
brand that's 6 years old is actually quite high. Um, and you see like people sharing photos on social media from their purchase and recommending us organically, and so that's really really fantastic. So I think that went even better than planned. um, I think what we didn't plan was, if you looked at our business plan when we submitted it to the end, about maybe having 6 store locations. We're currently doing 30, and we're supposed to double by the end of this year. So we do expect to have a little over 100 stores in the next maybe 3 years. And that's definitely not something we planned, but it's something that has been very helpful for us, and it's been really important for our growth trajectory.
So you're going to end up with 100 stores in Mexico. Will you go anywhere else?
So
Are you going to come to the U.S. to compete with Warby Parker now?
maybe we should go to the Hispanic market, so the south of the US. No, actually, our thoughts are around Latin American expansion. So what we've seen is the problem that we saw in Mexico with Luxottica having a huge play, was definitely, it's the same in a lot of countries. It's the same in the US. Just you've had it disrupted by Warby Parker and others like Semi Optical. And so last year we decided to launch our first international country. We opened Chile, which was we opened 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. So the
Uh,
timing was definitely complicated, but we're excited about the prospect of growing the brand there. And I think we have an appealing value proposition that we're bringing to the people in Chile as well.
so and operating in other countries is will be similar, you think? So in elsewhere in Latin America.
So one thing that is special is that because glasses are a medical device, you kind of need to set up some sort of local operation,
So
which is
that but
also something yeah.
that's another difference from the U.S. That's the one I remember that as well, right? That in the U.S. it's not a medical device, and in Latin America it is. So it's the regulations are different. No.
Yeah, the regulations are different, and then shipping cross border when it's regulated, it's difficult. So
Uh,
we set up local operations, and but a lot of the things we do, it's centralized, and I think that was important on why we launched Chile, is because it was our first country where things are a lot easier to operate, because it's a good place to do business, and you basically have a ton to figure out as to international operations. And so we wanted a country that was easier, in the sense that things are easier, and e-commerce penetration is higher in Chile. Regulation
mhm.
for prescriptions is better for online purchases than in Mexico. So we kind of saw a ton of compelling reasons to start with Chile, and have it just be our market to learn. And once we feel comfortable with the product market fit and how we're operating, with a regional team and everything, then we can ramp up into other countries. And that was a bit of the reasoning behind it.
That makes sense. Now, so you started there and you were going well in Mexico, and then the pandemic hits. So I take it the pandemic was problematic, given that you had so many stores.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're full online and online explodes, then that definitely is good. I think we had a lot of our online sales explode.
So
But
online benefited,
yeah,
and
online definitely benefited, but our stores just went to like zero for a few weeks because we actually had to close them. Then we were
mhm.
able to reopen, but with a ton of restrictions. Um, but just in the end, we managed to kind of work on those dynamics, those omni-channel dynamics, where basically people were just coming in with appointments for the eye exam, and they would be in and out super quick with a lot of like hygiene protocol, feeling super safe. And so we were able to kind of leverage our physical presence to just ramp up growth. And so we actually ended up growing last year despite COVID and the crazy world that we were. But obviously
Wow.
March, April, May were horrible months. We did believe that we might go broke. Fortunately, we had money in the bank, so that helped, and we reacted quickly, which was also important. But definitely a tough year. I'd say I aged a little bit in those few months.
Well, you don't look it, so that's good, and I'm glad that worked out. So now I have to ask the question, which I'm sure you get this question all the time, and you've grown. What's the vision for the future?
So I think for us, it's really about being the best alternative for anyone that needs to buy glasses out there, not just in Mexico, but in Latin America. And so the vision is to be the largest optical brand in Latin America in the next 5 years.
And you intend to just keep going? Will you sell this, or you think you're gonna run it for a long time? Sounds like you like it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But I still see myself running the business if the funds I have agree with that. And so far they've agreed. But yeah, as long as I'm having fun, as long as I'm feeling challenged, and as long as I'm enjoying my day to day, I see why not.
Okay, very good. So there's a question: what resources? So you did the offline is straightforward. How did you create the online, and was it harder to do in Mexico than it would be in the U.S.?
So I think it was actually surprisingly easy in the sense that when we started the 2 years before that, there'd been a lot of businesses that had done the e-commerce thing in Mexico, and so things were starting to move quicker. One thing that we did was use Shopify to kind of launch our e-commerce site at a very low cost.
Oh,
Um, and that worked really well for us. We actually used it for about 3.5 years. We had programmers that would later like work on that, but at the beginning we didn't even have to have developers on the team, with just Shopify. And the logistics worked really well. So you had FedEx, you had UPS, you had DHL. It was a little bit expensive, but it wasn't anything that couldn't be managed if you thought about it before. Um, Payment processing was a little bit more difficult because banking penetration in Mexico is like 30% of the population. So you had to think
mm,
about alternatives. So we had to set up payments in convenience stores, but there was already like an infrastructure for that. So it was not particularly hard to get that done. And I think there were a ton of tools that were already being built from either other startups or just incumbents that had sort of built solutions that could help. And that was actually something that we could use. So like our MVP was super cheap to launch. I think we launched with about $15,000, and with that, we managed to get a significant amount of traction that would later help us raise money to buy inventory, to put into marketing, and just continue to ramp up the team.
very interesting. Well, now I'm going to move to some general questions, and then I'm going to ask you for advice. So, first of all, what's the hardest part of your job?
Oof. I think there's two things. One is like you never get a vacation. Like even if you're on vacation and you turn your cell phone off, your mind is always thinking about this. It's really hard to disconnect. And I think working on a business for 6 years and not being able to turn your mind off is really hard. So I think that's been one of the hardest things. I've learned to be better at it over the time, but I'd say it's still super challenging to really like sleep well at night. I have a hard time because you have 350 people that depend on your decisions. It's hard. So I'd say that's the hardest part probably. The other part is just like even if you think you've made it, you always think this could all go downhill very quickly. Like we've built a business that's reasonably on solid foundations. So we've been profitable for a couple of years. It's not like we need to raise money constantly. We only do it to accelerate growth. But it's just even then you get COVID hit, and then you are kind of everything I thought was solid is not solid. Then you like lose key people from your team because some other startup with more money comes in and steals them off you, and you're like, I thought I really had that team figured out, and you don't. So it's just it never seems to stop. It never seems to be able to kind of stabilize and be comfortable. So I think it's that's what's a little bit tiresome to do it, and that's why a lot of startup founders don't run their businesses forever, right? Because it's exhausting.
Interesting. And what's the so that's bad. So what's the best part of the job? There must be something good about
No, sorry. I definitely love my job. I love walking down the street and seeing people wear Ben and Frank glasses. I love all the people that have come and worked for us, super smart, that continue to work for us and have like stuck with us during the hard times. I just love seeing the impact on what we do, and being a responsible businessman is probably one of my biggest satisfactions, or businesswomen, I should say.
it. Business person, we'll go.
Correct. Just like paying fair salaries, giving people access to like healthcare, that sort of thing is just something that I personally take a lot of pride in, particularly in a country like Mexico where things are definitely difficult and not a lot of people get fair salaries and everything. So I take a lot of pride in that, and just seeing what we're building and the brand that people like love, I think that is amazing, and that's what makes me smile every day.
So that's very cool. So going back to the gender thing, so you're a woman founder, and that is sometimes a challenge in the U.S. How was that in Mexico? Was it a help? Was it a hindrance? Did it how did people react to you?
I would divide it into two things. I'd say um, for suppliers and that sort of thing, it's actually been bad because they're not used to seeing me as a decision maker. I don't think it helps that I look like I'm 12 years old a lot of times.
Oh,
So
come
when
on, come on. They should know
like
you're like smart. You're a lot smarter than most of them, I would suspect. But anyway, good.
no, but I've had suppliers kind of ask to talk to my co-founder, to Eduardo, to kind of hoping that he's going to be the decision maker. And I'm like, you have it wrong. You have to convince me. And if you don't convince me, this is never going to work. So I think that's been probably some of the worst parts, is that Mexico in particular is a very macho culture. And so people are
Yeah.
not used to seeing women in decision making spots. So that's been most difficult. For fundraising and everything, obviously I've read what's happened in the US, and you see the numbers, and in Mexico it's very similar. Like I just read a report where like 2% of last year's money went into companies that were co-founded by female founders. Not even talking only female founded companies, but it's very, very small. And I think it's a combination of things. It can partially be that women tend to be more, or tend to be less risk averse, or more risk averse, sorry.
More
And so
listeners, yeah.
they don't look to do like high growth businesses as much as men. Um, and I think that has helped me in the sense that funds want to fatten their statistics that they invest in women. So when they see a business that is like well run, that has traction, that has a female founder, it becomes like they love you, and you become like their portfolio company that they want to like show off to anyone. And then I get invited to panels all the time because they want like a female founder on a panel, and it's always like me. I'd say there's like maybe 5 companies in Mexico that have a female founder that have raised more than $1 million. So it's definitely a very small universe of companies, and so it's always the same 5 people that are in the same panels. But I think for me it's more good than bad. It's just it's given me a bigger spotlight than otherwise, maybe. Um, and I think investors are eager to change. It's just that there's a ton of baggage culturally that doesn't allow a lot of companies founded by women to get to the stage where they can be VC funded.
That's very interesting. But so it's actually good for your brand because actually getting out there is good, particularly good for your company. So that's very interesting. I should ask, was the New Venture Challenge? The New Venture Challenge was pretty good in that regard.
Yeah, I can't complain. I mean, I never noticed any sort of difference. So
No, we have actually a very good track record with women founders, I think. So, and you're part of that, which is fantastic. Um, let's see, two more questions. How has your job changed, or has it? Maybe it hasn't. You said you worry all the time. So how has it changed?
no, it's definitely changed. So obviously at the beginning it was very much about thinking through day-to-day problems and solving them. Now it's basically how do I enable the people that work for me to solve those problems and no longer be the problem solver, but just the enabler, and to make sure we have a highly functional, particularly leadership team, which is my responsibility, to make sure that everyone is doing their job and is getting all the resources that they can, to get their job done and to be more successful in that. So I'd say it has shifted to be very, very managerial. I spend most of my day in meetings, with my team mostly. And it's something that has been very important to kind of understand how to be a reasonably good leader. I can't say I'm the best, but it's something that I work on constantly.
Very interesting. So you have to learn how to delegate and be the boss as opposed to actually getting into the details. Um,
And I love doing Excel. So sometimes it's just I sometimes want to do the Excel myself, but that's not the answer to the problem.
one I didn't ask earlier. I'm going to ask it, and then I'm going to go to a couple other things. Are you going to raise more money? How do you think about that as you grow?
So I think we're probably gonna do one, maybe two last rounds of financing. As I mentioned, we're profitable already, but for us, we need money to kind of grow quicker and open more stores and open more countries. So we're currently in a process to fundraise, which I can say with all honesty that Steve Kaplan has actually helped us. And it's good that I was his student 3 times because he actually knows who I am when I write him an email. And that has been helpful with one of the funds with which we're considering fundraising. But I think sometimes fundraising is more of a vanity metric, for some startups where it just feels that you just fundraise for the sake of fundraising. For us, it's really about how do we make the most efficient use of capital and what's the most efficient way we can build the business. And it's leveraging debt. So we actually fundraised some debt last year, and
Hmm.
it's getting a good mix of both. So I don't foresee ourselves raising a ton more money just because we can be lean in our expenses, and we can get our stores to kind of pay back quickly, and so that should be helpful for us not having to fundraise a lot more than we've already.
Very interesting. It's Mark Cuban was in class a couple of years ago, Mark Tebby's class, and he said something along those lines. He said a lot of people fundraise and they view it as a celebration, and he said no, it's not a celebration; it's an obligation. And that's you want to make sure that you get the money and you use it well, rather than use fundraising as a celebration. So.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely. And I mean, for example, we don't even announce our fundraises, not even internally and not even externally, just because we don't think it's a milestone. Milestone is building the business, not fundraising. For us, it's not important. it's my job is to make sure we have money in the bank so that we can expand at the pace we want to expand. But other than that, I have no pride in saying, yeah, we're super well funded. um, I take more pride in saying we're a profitable company. We're based on solid metrics, and we keep growing, hopefully triple digits again. So
Excellent. Well, let's hope that I will very much hope that happens. So you're in Mexico City, and what's the ecosystem like there, and how you said it changed. So how has it changed?
I think it's changed a lot from the time we started. So when we started, and when I was doing my internship at a VC fund here, we were talking about maybe 4 to 5 top VC funds and a ton of small funds that were given money by the government so that it could help spur the ecosystem. What ended up happening is that those small funds that didn't have the good solid basis kind of went bust, but the funds that were good and that were like investing smart have been able to raise significant funds, and so we have several funds now that are going into the third and fourth fund. They've doubled or tripled their fund size. It's still small funds, but it's still significant change from when we started. So when we started, a lot of funds were maybe $20 million, and now they're fundraising $100 million vehicles. So it's a big change. And I think the other big change is people are starting to realize that the amount of money put into venture capital in Latin America is pathetic. When you look at it in terms of GDP, India has more than 5 times the amount of VC money than Latin America. When you look at
Hmm.
per capita spending, per capita penetration of internet, it's amazing. It's prime for disruption. The middle class is there. And so there's tons of opportunities. And I think what has happened was there's been very talented founders, a lot of them foreigners, to be honest, that are coming to Mexico to start businesses and are growing super quickly and super well. And so now American funds are starting to look into the Mexican ecosystem. So now you have Andreessen Horowitz, Excel, a lot of these big funds putting tickets in Sequoia, obviously,
Hmm.
putting tickets that are good for the region. Today we had the first Mexican company to announce a $4 billion valuation, uh, a startup. So obviously that is the sort of milestones that help in terms of having more money come into the region. And I think that's really going to help because, I mean, these funds are a lot better in terms of the experience that they have, in terms of the teams that they've built, than the local funds that do not have that experience and that are used to not being in competitive markets. In the US, these funds are used to compete on every deal. In Mexico, that doesn't happen. They tend to co-invest a lot, and so that doesn't necessarily push them to become the best funds. And I think the foreign presence and that the better practices that are coming into the market are really going to help entrepreneurs build bigger businesses and have a lot more capital along the way to get to whatever they need to get their businesses to be a $4 billion business, which is obviously something that is to be celebrated in terms of milestones for the ecosystem.
Now, do you invest in any of these startups or help them, or are you too busy with Ben and Frank to do anything else?
So I would love to be an angel investor. Unfortunately, I am still in the phase of being an entrepreneur that's still poor. And my salary is still below what a new grad would get coming out of business school. I still have business school debt to pay off. So unfortunately, I'm not there yet. Hopefully, I will be soon, I'd say. Um, but in the meantime, what I do try to do is mentor and do intros and help. Particularly, I try to be involved with female founders just because I feel like there's less resources out there for them. But I do tend to spend maybe 4 hours a month or even a little bit more to kind of mentor companies and see if they can do intros, help them out with anything. So it's something I enjoy, and I think it's part of the give back that entrepreneurs have to do to develop the ecosystem and have better companies come after us. I think that's always at least that's always what I would want, is to have better companies be funded and be responsible and do good job with more resources.
That's very cool. Well, I am hopeful very soon you'll have some ability to make some of those investments. Maybe you'll invest in a new venture challenge team. That's the goal.
Maybe I will reserve a portion of my check to invest in new venture challenge companies.
Excellent. So now let me. I've got a few minutes left. Let me ask you some booth questions and advice questions. So, what did you learn at Booth that was helpful?
So a little bit of everything, but very tactical. I would say your class is probably one of the most useful because learning how to read a term sheet is something that you want to know how to do when you're fundraising. You
Very
want to
good.
know what a limitation preference is and what a drag along and tag along right actually means. Um,
Excellent.
I'd say that's been very useful in my job over the past 5 years. Um, and fortunately, I've been able to negotiate those terms to my favor most of the time. But actually knowing what they mean is important. I think the other thing that it has been helpful is I did try to spend a lot of time on management courses in terms of more like the psychology of managing. So I think those classes, even if at the beginning after graduation are not the classes that you use the most, those are the sort of things where you can think about books and resources that kind of help more in the journey I'm going through right now. So I'd say that the classes around managing the workplace have been actually super useful, and I recommend take more of those. I want to go back and do my 3 classes sometime soon, and I would focus on those type of classes.
What do you wish you had learned at Booth that you learned on the job?
So I think there's a ton of things, but I think it's impossible to learn in school because
Okay.
most of the learning you kind of ground it when you get it when you put it on practice in more like in an actual business, and it's very difficult. Like a ton of stuff that I supposedly learned at Booth, it just I didn't actually remember it until like it came down to a specific scenario, and then it's like, oh, this would be useful, and then you kind of go back and look at what you wrote down in those classes. Hopefully you wrote down something, and try to refresh it. um, I think the only thing that I should have learned probably is to understand better the venture capital model, and really understand when people say venture capital, you need to 10x your money. You don't have to 10x their money this round. You have to 10x their money in the next probably 3 rounds for it to make sense. So I think it's something that I didn't realize at the time, and now I realize it. So when people told me $1 billion market for glasses is too small, I didn't really understand why they would say that. Today I see it very clearly. But I think that's something that would have been useful to know before I started the business. I don't know if it would have stopped me, but I do know that maybe I would have thought about fundraising a little bit different.
Interesting. Um, it's the 25th year of the New Venture Challenge. What advice do you give to the current teams?
Um,
And I
so
assume we
the
have some
first one is
current
if you don't win, don't get demotivated. Um, I think there's always teams that win, and not necessarily are the teams that in the long run are there. So don't lose hope if you don't win.
That's right. Who won your year?
Transparent
That's
MBA were the winners
right,
in
and
our
they
year.
and they got raised some money and then they failed pretty quickly. So
And I mean, it was the classic venture capital bet. It's a home run or it's a zero, and if it's a zero, it's going to be a quick zero.
mhm.
So I mean, it made perfect sense that they won. It's just that, well, now they're probably onto something else, and we're still building this business. So don't get demotivated if you're not number one. Um, Two is just take advantage of the resources given to you. And I would shout out especially to Professor Kaplan, obviously, who I already mentioned is helping us with our current fundraising, but also people like Michael Alter, Waverly Deutsch. I mean, seriously, to have these people, you have access to the best minds and are so willing to help. And I would just take advantage of that, because you don't get that mix of knowledge and nice in the same mix that often. So I think that is definitely one of the things I am most grateful for. Michael Alter is actually an advisor for us. He's on our cap table, and hopefully one day we'll give him a ton of returns for all the help he's given us.
And that's very good. He loves working with you, so the feeling on that is mutual. Next question is, what advice would you give anyone in the audience who wants to be you someday?
So I think for me, and I think this is very important, I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur particularly. I think I was just open to the possibility, and I think that is the most important thing. Be open to the possibility, and then once you decide that you want to do it, put all your passion into it. It's gonna drive you crazy. You're not gonna sleep a lot, but it's super rewarding. And reach out to people. Everyone is eager to help entrepreneurs. It's something that I've really noticed, that it's very difficult to get a no, which is something that I think is awesome. And just take advantage of that. Take advantage of everyone willing to help, and is like, everyone is rooting for you. It's very difficult for not rooting for an entrepreneur. Everyone wants you to win. And I think it's very difficult to say that in any other profession in the world. So just take advantage and just work your ass off to do that, and take advantage of the resources you have and the network you have.
So that is terrific. I think that's a good note on which to end. So I want to thank you for taking the time and for giving that advice. So work very, very hard, go for it, be passionate. And that's like so important for the investors, right? They're looking for that. And that's why they're looking for that, because it's important. And we wish you the best of luck in the fundraising. And we expect in another few years you have built this business to 100 plus stores, and you will dominate Latin America. And then you will come back and invest in some new venture challenge companies. So
that's our deal.
Excellent. So thank you very much, and thank you all for watching. And I hope some of you emulate Mariana and are as successful as she is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.